Karen Wellington's Vision 2025 presentation continued as waitstaff in crisp white uniforms circulated with champagne flutes through Willow Creek's newly renovated clubhouse. The room was filled with the neighborhood's most influential residents, all dressed in cocktail attire despite the event being advertised as a casual community meeting. The Wellington waterscape will be the crown jewel of our community revitalization, Karen declared, using a laser pointer to highlight features on the holographic display. We'll have guided paddleboat tours, a children's splash zone, and, she paused dramatically, a monthly sunset soiree with catering from Bellissimo. The mention of the area's most exclusive restaurant elicited appreciative murmurs. Trish, never without her phone, live-streamed the event to her 15,000 followers. #community goals. #luxury living, she narrated, panning across the crowd before landing back on Karen. Her followers didn't need to know that most of them were local realtors. She'd promised exclusive listings to once property values inevitably skyrocketed. Douglas wiped his perpetually damp forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. The investment potential is extraordinary, he added, clicking to a slide showing projected property value increases. My contacts at Meridian Developments are already expressing interest in our evolution. What he didn't mention was his significant stake in Meridian, or that they specialized in converting residential neighborhoods into commercial residential mixed developments. Victoria, whose Miss Willow Creek crown from 15 years ago still occupied a prominent position in her home office, worked the room with practiced charm. As your future state representative, she whispered to key voting blocs, I can ensure our community interests are protected at the Capitol. The fact that she hadn't officially announced her candidacy was a mere technicality. From the back of the room, elderly Hank Peterson frowned. That puns on protected land, he called out, his voice cutting through the celebratory atmosphere. Thompson's property has conservation status. Karen's smile didn't falter as she responded smoothly. We've consulted with environmental experts who've identified several compliance issues with the current situation. She emphasized the last word with distaste. In fact, our remediation plan will create a more sustainable ecosystem than the current swamp. That's not a swamp, Hank protested. It's a natural wetland. Perhaps you'd like to review the environmental assessment? Karen suggested sweetly, signaling to Victoria, who approached Hank with a thick binder. The technical details are quite fascinating. What she didn't mention was that the assessment had been conducted by her brother-in-law's company, which specialized in preparing documentation for commercial developments. As Hank became distracted with the binder, Karen continued her presentation, unveiling the project timeline. Phase 1 begins this weekend, with preliminary site preparation. In the crowd, Marissa Chen frowned, typing rapidly on her phone to warn Michael. But Karen had planned for this too. And I'm thrilled to announce that all cell tower maintenance in our area has been expedited to this weekend. We'll experience brief service interruptions, but it's a small price to pay for enhanced connectivity. Douglas gave a thumbs up from the side of the room. His college roommate at the telecommunications company had been quite helpful in arranging the conveniently timed outage. As the presentation concluded, attendees swarmed the 3D model, wooing and eyeing over the promised luxury. No one noticed Victoria discreetly collecting phones for a raffle entry, copying contact information and screening messages. Outside the clubhouse, under the cover of darkness, a landscaping company was already delivering equipment to a storage facility near Michael's property. The invoice, handled personally by Karen, described the work as emergency ecological remediation and listed tomorrow's date. The Wellington waterscape wasn't just a community project, it was Karen's masterpiece, her legacy, and nothing, certainly not some eccentric veteran with his wild birds, would stand in her way. Elena Thompson emerged from her sedan like a force of nature, her blazer as crisp as her legal arguments were about to be. Despite having driven 3 hours on short notice, she looked ready for court, her tablet already in hand, as she approached the gathering. Michael, don't say another word, she called out, striding past the landscaping crew. I've filed for an emergency injunction. She turned to Karen with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elena Thompson, Environmental Law. I understand you believe you have authority to modify protected wetlands without permits from the Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife Service, or State Environmental Protection Division. Karen's composure wavered for only a moment before she recovered. We have all necessary approvals, she insisted, nodding to Douglas, who fumbled through his folder. While everyone's attention was on the legal confrontation, Michael subtly tapped a sequence on his phone. Above them, almost silent, his wildlife monitoring drone deployed from its weatherproof housing on the roof. Michael had modified it during his sleepless night, adding additional memory cards and enhancing its transmission capabilities to bypass the conveniently timed cell tower maintenance. The woman from the news station was already setting up a portable camera. Sandy Miles, Channel 7 Environment Watch, she introduced herself. We received an anonymous tip about potential wetland violations. Is it true you're planning to convert a registered wildlife habitat into a recreational facility? Absolutely not, Karen replied smoothly. This is simply a community beautification project that will enhance the natural environment while making it accessible to everyone. The government truck's door opened, and a tall woman in a Department of Natural Resources uniform stepped out, clipboard in hand. I'm Agent Patel with DNR. We need to inspect the proposed modification area. Our records indicate this is a registered wildlife sanctuary with protected species present. Douglas sidled up to Karen, whispering urgently, the paperwork from my contact doesn't include wildlife sanctuary exemptions. We need to pause until... We are not pausing anything, Karen hissed back. She plastered on a smile and approached Agent Patel. There must be some confusion. Our environmental assessment clearly shows this area requires remediation. Perhaps you'd like to speak with our consultant. She gestured toward a man climbing out of an SUV that had just arrived, wearing khakis and a polo with a corporate logo. Elena's eyebrows rose as she typed something into her tablet. Interesting. Greenway Solutions was recently fined for falsifying environmental impact reports in 3 counties. She showed the article to Agent Patel, whose expression darkened. Above them, the drone silently recorded everything, its feed broadcasting directly to cloud storage and, thanks to Michael's military buddy's intervention, to several environmental advocacy groups. Hank Peterson, meanwhile, had cornered the animal control officer. Son, that uniform doesn't look regulation to me. Mind showing me your wildlife handling certification? The man glanced nervously at Karen, who was now engaged in an increasingly heated discussion with Agent Patel. Michael noticed Douglas edging toward the pond, trying to appear casual as he approached the natural dam that controlled water flow. In one hand, he held what looked like surveying equipment, but Michael recognized it immediately as an auger, a tool that could quickly breach the earthen structure. "Yo, God," Michael whispered, and the largest goose immediately changed position, cutting off Douglas's path to the dam. Victoria, seeing the situation deteriorating, attempted damage control with the news reporter. "This is really a wonderful community story," she insisted. "The Wellington waterscape will increase property values for everyone and create a legacy for generations to come." "And what about the impact on native wildlife?" Sandy Miles asked, her microphone extended. "Well, we'll have very tasteful decorative ducks," Victoria replied with a confident smile. "Brass ones, I believe. Much cleaner than these." She gestured dismissively at the geese. Through his earpiece connected to the drone's audio feed, Michael heard Karen's increasingly desperate phone call. "I don't care what it takes. Get Judge Harmon on the phone now." "Yes, I know it's Saturday." Michael stared at the stack of violation notices, his morning coffee growing cold beside him. Each envelope bore the same aggressive red stamp. Urgent. Silvinc required. Shaking his head, he sliced open the first one with his index finger. Asterisk property maintenance standards violation. Overgrown vegetation, exceeding 8 inches in height asterisk. He glanced out his kitchen window at the natural wildflower meadow he carefully cultivated to support local pollinators. 3 years of work, certified by the state's conservation department as a model habitat. The second notice was even more absurd. Asterisk unauthorized water feature modification. All water elements visible from community spaces must maintain aesthetic standards consistent with Willow Creek Estate's design guidelines. Asterisk. His pond had been here long before Willow Creek Estates existed. The developer, old Hank Peterson, had specifically promised Michael that the natural features would be grandfathered in when he purchased the property. The third notice made his blood pressure spike. Asterisk livestock ordinance violation. No farm animals permitted within subdivision boundaries. Asterisk. They're calling my rescue geese livestock, Michael muttered, crumpling the paper in his fist. As if hearing their names, Leo humped from the pond's edge, his distinctive call echoing across the water. Michael watched through the window as the goose performed his morning patrol, regal neck extended, his damaged wing. The result of a fishing line injury Michael had treated, now healed enough for limited flight. His phone buzzed with a text from Marissa Chen, one of the few neighbors Michael actually liked. Asterisk, did you see the HOA newsletter? Karen's coming for your pond. Watch out. Asterisk. Michael quickly found the digital newsletter in his spam folder. There it was, front and center. Community Enhancement Initiative Phase 1. Reclamation of neglected areas. Beneath the headline was a poorly photoshopped image of his pond, transformed into something resembling a shopping mall fountain, complete with benches and carefully trimmed ornamental grasses. Not going to happen, Michael said aloud, reaching for his worn military cap. Outside, the morning sun illuminated his sanctuary. Artemis and Hera floated serenely on the water's surface, while Zeus guarded a section of reeds, where a family of mallards had recently nested. The pond's edge was alive with dragonflies, their iridescent wings catching the light. Michael had returned from his final tour of duty with invisible wounds that no VA hospital could treat. Nightmares, hypervigilance, the inability to function in crowded spaces. This land, this water, had healed him when nothing else could. He pulled out his phone and began documenting every inch of his property. The native black willow trees he'd planted to prevent erosion, the floating platforms he built as safe nesting sites, the carefully maintained water quality testing station. As he worked, the geese followed him curiously, occasionally nudging his hand for treats. They sensed his tension. These birds always knew his mood before he did. Don't worry, guys, Michael told them, scratching Leo's neck in the spot that made the goose close his eyes in contentment. Nobody's turning your home into a tourist attraction. In the distance, he spotted an unfamiliar luxury SUV driving slowly past his property. It paused briefly before continuing down the road, but not before Michael caught a glimpse of a blonde woman taking photos with a telephoto lens. The battle lines were being drawn, and Michael Thompson, who had survived far worse than suburban politics, was ready. While Elena engaged Agent Patel and Hank, distracted the fake animal control officer, Michael spotted Douglas making another attempt to reach the pond's edge. This time, he was circling around through the cattails, likely hoping the tall vegetation would conceal his approach. Michael's hand moved to the whistle around his neck. It was time for the final contingency plan. 3 sharp blasts echoed across the property, a signal Michael had spent months teaching his geese. The response was immediate and spectacular. Leo, already on guard duty, let out a honk that sounded eerily like a battle cry. His wings spread to their full impressive span, his neck extended to its full height. From the reeds, where Douglas was attempting to hide, Artemis burst forth in a spray of water, executing a perfect flanking maneuver that would have made Michael's old drill sergeant proud. What the? Douglas stumbled backward, his expensive loafers sinking into the mud as Artemis advanced, her head lowered in the classic goose threat posture. Hera, who had been quietly floating near a cluster of water lilies, suddenly transformed from serene pond innocent to airborne fury. She launched herself directly toward Trish, who was still filming what she believed would be damning footage of Michael's erratic behavior. Instead, her camera now captured her own panicked face as she backpedaled from the charging goose. "Get it away?" Trish shrieked, her professional demeanor evaporating. Her designer heel caught in the soft ground, sending her sprawling backward. The camera flew from her hands, landing with perfect karmic justice in a shallow puddle. But it was Zeus who delivered the coup de grace. The largest and most temperamental of Michael's rescue flock had been watching Karen with unmistakable malice throughout the confrontation. Now, released from restraint by Michael's signal, he made his move. With surprising speed for his size, Zeus charged directly at Karen, powerful wings beating the air, his territorial hiss audible to everyone within 50 feet. Karen's eyes widened in genuine fear. "Control your animal," she demanded, her voice rising to a pitch that probably only dogs could fully appreciate. "They're not pets, they're federally protected wildlife," Michael replied calmly, making no move to intervene. "And this is their natural habitat that you're threatening. They're simply responding to an invasive species." He couldn't keep the small smile from his face as he added, "Nature can be so fascinating to observe." Zeus, apparently understanding the dramatic moment called for something special, snapped his beak forward and caught the strap of Karen's designer handbag. With one powerful jerk, he ripped it from her grasp. "My Birkin!" Karen wailed as the goose dragged the luxury item through the muddy shallows before dunking it ceremoniously in deeper water. The animal control officer had retreated to the safety of his vehicle. Douglas was cornered against a tree by Artemis, who pecked threateningly at his shoe each time he tried to move. Victoria had climbed onto the hood of the nearest SUV, her campaign-ready smile replaced by undignified panic. Sandy Miles from Channel 7 was capturing everything, her expression professional but unable to completely hide her delight at the unfolding chaos. "This is certainly a unique environmental protest," she commented, microphone held steady despite the pandemonium. Agent Patel watched with crossed arms. "I've seen territorial displays before, but this is remarkably coordinated." "They're very intelligent birds," Michael said proudly, "and they're very attached to their home." In the distance, sirens wailed. Karen had apparently managed to call for police backup. But Michael wasn't worried anymore. His drone had captured every moment of the attempted invasion, from the falsified documents to Douglas's sabotage attempt. Elena had already secured the emergency injunction, and now, the HOA's hostile takeover had been repelled by the most unlikely but effective defense force. 4 angry geese, with a remarkably strong sense of territory and justice. Michael stood his ground as landscapers began unloading equipment around him. The morning air, usually filled with birdsong, now echoed with diesel engines and shouted instructions. Zeus had positioned himself strategically between the strangers and his favorite nesting area, his black eyes tracking every movement. "This is private property," Michael stated, his voice carrying the calm authority that had once commanded troops. "I'm going to have to ask everyone to leave immediately." Karen stepped forward, her safari outfit complete with a ridiculous pith helmet that made her look like a cartoon explorer. "Actually, Michael, this is now a community improvement zone." She attempted to hand him a document. "If you'll just sign this acknowledgement of temporary easement." Michael didn't take the paper. "I'm not signing anything, and I never granted any easement, temporary or otherwise." "That's the beauty of Section 17.3 of the Covenant," Karen replied, her smile tight. "Easements can be established by the Board for Ecological Remediation without owner consent in emergencies." She gestured toward Douglas, who was setting up what appeared to be a presentation board on an easel. "And what emergency would that be?" Michael asked, crossing his arms. Douglas flipped over the board to reveal enlarged photographs of Michael's pond, with lurid red circles highlighting absolutely normal wetland conditions. "Mosquito breeding grounds," he announced, pointing to a typical cattail stand. "Erosion hazards," he continued, indicating the natural shoreline variation. "And most concerning," he flipped to another image, contamination indicators. The so-called contamination was simply the natural algae growth that Michael carefully monitored as part of the pond's healthy ecosystem. "This is ridiculous," Michael said, pulling out his phone to call his contact at the wildlife department. No signal. He remembered Marissa's warning text about mysterious service outages. Victoria approached with clipboard in hand. "We've taken the liberty of relocating your birds to the community pond temporarily." She gestured toward a man in what appeared to be animal control uniform approaching with a large net. That was the final straw. Michael reached for his whistle and gave one sharp blast. Immediately, all 4 geese snapped to attention. Zeus, already on edge, launched himself from the water with a powerful wing display that sent the supposed animal control officer scrambling backward. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Michael warned calmly. Canadian geese are federally protected. Attempting to capture them without proper wildlife rehabilitation certification is a federal offense with penalties up to $15,000 per bird. Karen's smile faltered, but only momentarily. "Trish, are you getting this? The threatening behavior?" Trish was indeed filming everything, her professional-grade camera capturing Michael from an angle that made him appear to be looming over Karen, though she had positioned herself deliberately close to him. "Perfect for the documentation," Trish murmured, zooming in. "Documentation of what?" Michael demanded. Karen's smile returned, sharper than before. "Your erratic behavior, of course. We're quite concerned about your well-being, living out here all alone." Her voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. "The stress of maintaining such a large property in your condition." Michael felt a chill. They weren't just after his pond. They were setting him up, painting him as unstable. A gruff voice cut through the tension. "Looks like I'm just in time for the show." Everyone turned to see Hank Peterson's ATV rumbling up the driveway, throwing dust over Karen's pristine outfit. Behind him came 2 more vehicles, a truck with government plates, and a small sedan with a local news station magnet on the door. Karen's composure cracked for the first time. "Who called them?"